In the days after the Israelites had crossed the Jordan River and encamped on its western bank, Joshua, son of Nun, prepared the people for what lay ahead. Quietly and without drawing attention, the two slipped away into the city under the cover of dusk. Their mission was to observe the city's defenses, its layout, and the spirit of its people. Jericho stood not far from their camp, its walls high, its gates fortified, and its people wary. Once the pursuers had gone, Rahab returned to the roof and spoke to the two men. She understood that they belonged to a people whose God was unlike any other. She recognized the power of the God of Israel and sought refuge in him. "You also will deal kindly with my family, our life for yours, even to death," they said. "If you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father, my mother, my brothers, but with faith, a scarlet cord, and the quiet obedience of those who trusted the Lord's promises." For her house was part of the city wall. Before they left, the spies gave her specific instructions. "Bind this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. Gather your family into your house. If anyone goes out to the doors, his blood shall be on his own head. But if anyone with you in the house is harmed, his blood shall be on ours, and all who belong to them, and deliver us from death." The men fled into the hill country and remained there 3 days, until their pursuers had returned. Once the danger had passed, they crossed back over the Jordan and returned to Joshua. Acting with courage and wisdom, she took the men and hid them under stalks of flax she had laid out on her roof. The land was the inheritance promised by God, but it would not be handed over without obedience and trust in his command. Joshua called to men and gave them clear instruction. "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." The spies entered Jericho and came to the house of a woman named Rahab. "Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Also, all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us. A harlot whose home was built into the city wall. There they found lodging." But news of their arrival spread quickly. "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. When it was time to close the city gate at dark, they went out. I do not know where they went. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them." Word reached the king of Jericho that 2 Israelites had come to spy out the land. He sent a message to Rahab. "Bring out the men who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." But Rahab had seen something different in these men, something beyond mere warriors. When the king's messengers arrived, Rahab told them, "Believe in her words." The king's men left at once, pursuing the road toward the Jordan. "I know that the Lord has given you this land," she said. "The fear of you has fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan. When we heard it, our hearts melted. Your God, he is God, in the heavens above and on the earth beneath." Rahab's confession was not one of mere fear, but of faith. "Now then," she said, "swear to me by the Lord that, as I have dealt kindly with you." The men agreed. To help them escape, Rahab let them down through her window by a rope. Rahab accepted the terms and tied the scarlet cord in her window. Reporting all that had happened, they said to him, "Thus began the path to Jericho's fall, not with swords, but with faith, a scarlet cord, and the quiet obedience of those who trusted the Lord's promises." After the spies returned from Jericho, their report stirred the hearts of the Israelites. "Truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands," they said. They camped at its edge for 3 days, watching the rushing waters and waiting for God's instruction. And to the priests he gave a solemn command. "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on before the people." On the 3rd day, the officers passed through the camp with clear commands. Holding the ark high upon their shoulders, The priests stood firm in the middle of the river until the entire nation had passed over. And take up 12 stones from where the priests stood, where Joshua set them up as a lasting witness, that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, on the eastern border of Jericho. There, with the stones standing upright in the ground, they remembered the miracle God had performed. The Lord had dried up the river, just as he had the sea, that they might know he was with them, he said, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Each man was to carry a stone on his shoulder, that this may be a sign among you, Joshua said. When your children ask, "What do these stones mean?" you shall tell them, "The waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant. These stones shall be a memorial forever." As soon as their feet touched the water's edge, the flow of the river halted. Upstream, far off near the city of Adam, the waters stood still, and downstream, the waters were cut off. As they stepped onto dry land, the waters of the river returned and flowed as before. The riverbed became dry, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, carried by the Levitical priests, God had brought them this far with power and purpose. What lay ahead would demand obedience and trust, but they had seen with their own eyes that nothing was too hard for the Lord. You shall set out and follow it. Keep a distance between you and the ark about 2,000 cubits, but do not come near it. You have not passed this way before. Confidence filled the camp, but the Jordan River stood between them and the land God had promised. It was at flood stage, overflowing its banks with swift, heavy waters. "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel. Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God." He reminded them that the Ark of the Covenant, the visible sign of God's presence, would go before them. "Behold," he said, "the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Choose 12 men, one from each tribe, and when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark rest in the Jordan, its waters shall be cut off, and the waters flowing from above shall stand in one heap, that they may know that, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Command the priests bearing the ark, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua rose early and led the people from Shittim to the Jordan. Joshua said to the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." As the priests stepped forward carrying the ark, the Lord spoke to Joshua, just as their fathers had done at the Red Sea. Then Joshua gathered the people and declared, when the people broke camp to cross the river, the priests went before them. Israel crossed on dry ground. Then the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the 12 chosen men, one from each tribe, to go back into the river. The stones were carried to their camp at Gilgal. Only after the last of the people had crossed did Joshua command the priests to come up from the Jordan. It was the 10th day of the first month, when the people came up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal. With the ark now resting among them and the river behind, Israel looked toward Jericho. God had brought them this far with power and purpose. What lay ahead would demand obedience and trust, but they had seen with their own eyes that nothing was too hard for the Lord. After crossing the Jordan, Israel camped at Gilgal, just east of Jericho. The land of Canaan lay before them. Make flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel a second time, until all the men who came out of Egypt, those who disobeyed and did not trust God to enter the promised land, had perished. Their sons had taken their place, and now they were being consecrated to the Lord. Though the first generation had been circumcised in Egypt, then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. The city was tightly shut, its gates barred. What the Lord would require was faith, not force. Bodies consecrated by covenant, and spirits led by God's holy presence. Their feet now stood on the soil of promise, and the Lord had gone before them. Israel would not take Jericho by strength, but by surrender to God's command. Their victory would be a testament to divine power, not human might. This was not merely a military campaign. It was the unfolding of God's promise through obedience and reverence. He lifted his eyes and saw a man standing before him with a drawn sword in his hand. "Now I have come." Joshua approached him and asked, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" No one went out and no one came in. So the name of that place was called Gilgal to that day. Those born during the wilderness journey had not. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath, and the hearts of its kings melted in fear. News had reached them that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan. None dared approach the people of Israel. Observed the Passover on the 14th day of the month. In the evening, on the plains of Jericho, it was their first Passover in the Promised Land. On the very next day, they ate of the produce of the land unleavened cakes and roasted grain. The manna, which had sustained them in the wilderness, ceased. From that day on, the people ate from the land of Canaan. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, "The Lord had led Israel in the wilderness for 40 years. After the circumcision, the people remained in their camp until they were healed. The people of Israel, now purified and obedient. What does my Lord say to his servant?" Joshua, now leading a consecrated people, looked toward the walls of Jericho. One evening, as Joshua was near Jericho, the man replied, "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord." Joshua fell on his face to the ground in reverence and said, "The commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, 'Take off your sandals from your feet.'" In that sacred moment, Joshua was reminded of Moses at the burning bush. The presence of God was with him. Joshua received no ordinary military strategy. As the people prepared to face Jericho, they did so with hearts marked by obedience, bodies consecrated by covenant, and spirits led by God's holy presence. Their feet now stood on the soil of promise, and the Lord had gone before them. The city of Jericho was fortified, its high walls unbroken, and its people watched Israel from within. Gripped by fear, they had heard of the parting of the Jordan and the victories of Israel's God. Jericho shut its gates, neither allowing entrance nor exit. But the Lord had already spoken. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, with its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city." The people had said nothing for 6 days and 6 circuits. Only the trumpets had spoken. Now, as the 7th circuit ended, Joshua cried out, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." Dust and cries filled the air. The stronghold that had intimidated Israel lay broken at their feet. The people charged straight ahead, each man taking the city directly before him. Israel entered Jericho not by siege or fire, but by the power of God. The Lord was with him, just as he had been with Moses. All the men of war going around the city once. Do this for 6 days. The priests gave a long blast on the trumpets, and the people shouted with all their might. Their voices rose like a wave. Then, just as the Lord had promised, the walls of the city collapsed. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messengers we sent. But keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest you bring trouble upon Israel. All silver and gold, and vessels of bronze and iron, are holy to the Lord, and shall go into the treasury of the Lord. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But Rahab and her family were spared, brought out of the house she had marked with the scarlet cord. The battle belonged to the Lord, and his power was revealed not just in conquest, but in the obedience of his people. They were taken outside the camp of Israel and kept safe. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets, When you hear a long blast with the ram's horn, have all the people shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. Then the people shall go up, every man straight before him." Joshua did as he was commanded. He summoned the priests and gave the instructions exactly as the Lord had spoken. 7 priests took up 7 trumpets of ram's horns and went before the ark of the Lord. The armed men marched ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark. While the trumpets sounded continually, Joshua commanded the people, "You shall not shout or make your voice heard." The priests blowing the trumpets as the Ark of the Covenant moved in solemn procession, the people of Jericho looked on from behind the walls. No arrows were loosed, no stones were thrown, only the sound of the ram's horns echoed in the air. "No word shall come out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout." On the first day, they set out in silence. The army of Israel marched around the city once. After circling the city, Israel returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. Every day, the people rose early, marched once around the city, and returned in silence. On the 7th day, they rose with the dawn. This time, instead of once, they would circle the city 7 times. The people marched in solemn obedience. The priests sounding the trumpets, once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, 6. Each circuit, a test of faith and endurance. Then came the 7th and final round. The walls of Jericho still stood in that moment. Stone upon stone fell. Joshua had given instructions beforehand. The city and all that is within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. The city was taken swiftly. Everything was destroyed as the Lord had commanded. So Jericho, the mighty city with walls that had stood for generations, fell without a sword raised against its stones. Joshua's fame spread throughout the land, and all who heard trembled. The Lord was with him, just as he had been with Moses. As the walls of Jericho collapsed, the Israelites surged forward in obedience. Every man went straight before him into the city, just as the Lord had commanded. "Go into the prostitute's house," he said, "and bring out from there the woman and all who belong to her, as you swore to her." Amid the sounds of crumbling stone and the cries of battle, Joshua remembered the promise made to Rahab. They made their way through the city ruins until they found Rahab's house, still standing along the city wall. They brought them to the outskirts of the camp of Israel. There, they waited apart from the people, not because they were unwelcome, but because the laws of Israel required it. They would soon be brought in, not just as guests, but as part of a people who serve the living God. He said, "Cursed before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates." The scarlet cord hung from the window, just as it had before. Jericho had not fallen by human strength, but by divine judgment, not just to Israel's victory, but to God's might, his faithfulness to promises, and his mercy toward those who believe. The fall of the city was complete. Its walls had fallen flat, and its idols were destroyed. To rebuild it in defiance would be to reject the Lord's power and invite ruin. Every building, every possession within Jericho was consumed by fire. She had believed the word of the Lord before seeing the miracle, and its fall proved that nothing could stand in the path of God's will. But they also remembered that victory required obedience. The silent march, the shout at the 7th trumpet, and the rescue of Rehoboth was exactly as the Lord had commanded. She had protected the messengers, risking her own life, and now she and her family were alive, spared in the midst of judgment. His name became known throughout the land, not because of his own power, but because of his faithfulness in leading God's people according to God's word. Only the silver, the gold, and the vessels of bronze and iron were kept. They had taken Jericho, but the journey into the promised land was only beginning. And she has lived in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. These were taken into the treasury of the house of the Lord, just as Joshua had instructed. She lived among the people of God. From her line would come kings, and in time, the name of Rahab would be remembered in the genealogy of Jesus himself. Inside, Rahab waited with her father, her mother, her brothers, and all her family. She had gathered everyone she could, trusting that the Lord would spare them. He called for the 2 men who had spied out the land. The young men went swiftly. The 2 men brought them out, leading Rahab and her family safely away from the destruction. Then the city was burned. Rahab the prostitute, once a woman of Jericho and an outcast by Israelite standards, was now remembered for her faith. The Bible says, "But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive." Her story did not end with rescue. Then Joshua pronounced a solemn curse on anyone who would try to rebuild Jericho. It was not a statement of anger, but a prophetic warning. The ruins of Jericho stood as a testimony. The people of Israel now looked toward the rest of the land the Lord had promised. Jericho had been the gateway, and so the Lord was with Joshua. The people had crossed the Jordan. They had taken Jericho, but the journey into the promised land was only beginning. After the destruction of Jericho, a deep sense of awe filled the people of Israel. They had witnessed the Lord bring down mighty walls without a single sword raised. The men returned and reported, "Do not send all the people. Only 2,000 or 3,000 men are needed, for the people of Ai are few." Encouraged by their words, Joshua sent about 3,000 men up to attack Ai. But something unexpected happened. "Get up! Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant. Do not hide it from me. They have taken what was devoted to destruction, and they found the items buried beneath Achan's tent, just as he had said, his sons and daughters, his oxen, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all he had, to the valley of Achan. They brought them before Joshua and all the people of Israel. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful cloak from 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. The Lord brings trouble on you today." And Achan and all that belonged to him were destroyed. A great heap of stones was raised over him, and the Lord's anger was turned away. They are hidden in the earth inside my tent. They have stolen, lied, and hidden things among their own belongings. The victory at Jericho had not come from their strength, and the defeat at Ai had not come from the strength of their enemy. His favor had returned, and he would lead them once more into victory. Both had been determined by their obedience or disobedience to the Lord, and it remained a reminder to Israel of what happens when sin hides in the camp. Confidence spread through the camp as they turned their attention to the next city, a smaller city compared to Jericho, resting on a hill near Bethlehem. Joshua sent men to spy out Ai, just as he had done with Jericho. The men of Ai rose up fiercely and struck down about 36 Israelites. The rest fled before them, chased from the city gate. Some were struck down on the slopes as the men of Ai pursued them. The hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down before the ark of the Lord, remaining there until evening. "The Canaanites will hear of it, surround us, and cut off our name. What will you do for your great name?" The elders of Israel did the same, putting dust on their heads. Joshua cried out, "Alas, O Lord God!" "Therefore," said the Lord, "Israel cannot stand before their enemies. I will not be with you unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. Why have you brought this people across the Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Ammonites? Would that we had been content to dwell beyond the Jordan." He continued, "O Lord, What can I say when Israel has turned their backs before their enemies?" But the Lord responded sharply. God revealed that someone in Israel had kept for himself what had been meant for destruction, what belonged to the Lord alone. The next morning, Joshua rose early and brought the tribes of Israel forward. The tribe of Judah was taken, then the clan of the then the family of Zabdi. And finally, a man named Achan was singled out. Joshua said to him, "My son, give glory to the Lord and give praise to him. Tell me what you have done." Achan replied, "Truly I have sinned against the Lord." Joshua sent messengers. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, the silver, the cloak, the gold bar. "There," Joshua said, "why have you brought trouble on us?" That place was named the Valley of Achan, which means trouble. Through this judgment, Israel learned a hard lesson. After the sin was dealt with, the Lord spoke again to Joshua. His favor had returned, and he would lead them once more into victory. With Achan's sin exposed and removed, the people of Israel purified themselves. The Lord's anger had been turned away, and now he spoke again to Joshua. "Do not be afraid, and do not be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you and arise. Go up to Ai. I have given it into your hand." The king of Ai saw them and gathered his warriors. Confident from their previous victory, the men of Ai rushed out to meet Israel in battle, leaving the city unguarded. This time, the Lord gave a new strategy. He told Joshua to set an ambush behind the city. When the smoke of the burning city rose to the sky, the men of Ai turned and saw what had happened. Every word was heard by the entire assembly of Israel. The law was their foundation. Israel had learned that the Lord fought for them. Their strength was not in their numbers or their swords, but in the presence of the living God among them. And the Lord was their strength. Each heap that marked judgment, Israel, led by Joshua, moved forward with courage, not because the road ahead was easy, but because they knew who went before them. And every altar that rose in worship stood as a testimony. The God of Israel was faithful to his word. He would lead his people into the land he had promised, so long as they walked in his ways, including the women, the children, and the foreigners living among them. Their courage melted. The Israelites who had fled turned back to face them. Trapped between the ambushers and Joshua's main force, the men of Ai were defeated. Joshua obeyed. The men of Ai gave chase, drawn away from their city. At that moment, Joshua stretched out his javelin toward Ai, and the Lord gave the signal. Only their king was taken alive and brought to Joshua. Afterward, the king of Ai was hanged on a tree until evening, then taken down and buried under a heap of stones at the city gate. Israel struck down 12,000 people in Ai that day. There, he built an altar to the Lord using uncut stones, as the law required. Upon the altar, they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. Just as the Lord had commanded, they devoted the city to destruction. But this time, the Lord allowed Israel to take the livestock and spoil for themselves. He chose 30,000 mighty men of valor and sent them out by night, instructing them to hide behind Ai and wait. Then he took another group and positioned them to approach the city from the front. Just as before, at dawn, Joshua rose and led his men up toward the gates of Ai. Joshua and the front forces pretended to flee, just as they had done in their earlier defeat. The men in ambush rose from their hiding place, entered the city, and set it on fire. Not a man of Ai remained standing. Joshua held out his javelin until the city was completely destroyed. With Ai conquered, Joshua led the people north to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, just as Moses had instructed. Joshua then read aloud all the words of the law of the blessings and the curses just as they were written in the book of the law. By doing this, Joshua reminded the people that their victories came from obedience, and their defeats came from disobedience. from Jericho's miraculous fall to the bitter defeat at Ai, and finally to their renewed obedience and victory. Each stone that lay in the ruins of Jericho and Ai, and so the conquest of Canaan had truly begun. Israel, led by Joshua, moved forward with courage and art, because the road ahead was easy, but because they knew who went before them.